Hi everyone, today I have an urban sketching tutorial for you. This is a digital drawing tutorial using the Procreate app that's available on the iPad. And this is the sketch we are going to draw. And this is the reference photo I have provided. This tutorial is going to be very detailed and hence quite long. And this is the type of tutorials I make for my patrons. So if you want access to even more in-depth tutorials like this, do consider supporting me on Patreon. The link is right here. First of all, let me just say that urban sketching is sketching on location. So with me drawing with the help of this reference photo, this is technically not urban sketching, but it's easier for me to teach you this way. The experience of drawing on location versus drawing at home is very different. So when I am drawing on location, I can feel the atmosphere, the mood, the weather. Since this is a bright and sunny day, I will be sweating a lot. My hands will be sweaty, and on the iPad it's going to create a lot of fingerprint smudges. All that is part of the experience. And when you're drawing on location, you get to see the subject as it is. When you look at a photo, there are going to be distortions. Like, for example, you can see the vertical line here, it's tilted this way, but in real life, this building is actually vertical. Urban sketching is all about the experience, and when you sketch on location, you get to remember the scene more vividly, even years after you have sketched the scene. So let's take a look at this reference photo of some shop houses. So it's a bright and sunny day. The shadow seems to be coming in this direction. So we can see the shop houses lit here, but there are some shadows here on the ground level and some shadows, cast shadows here. And this photo format is 3:2. So for my sketch, I will be using the 16:9 format like this. And after I've completed my drawing, I will crop this into a square format like this to share on Instagram. So I want to draw this scene like white. I want to show as much details as possible, and later on I can crop to size down. Let's open the Procreate app. So let's create a canvas. By the way, you can create your own canvas size. Just click this button here. You can type in whatever resolution you want. I'm going to have it as 4K UHD, so that's 3840 by 2160, and go look into this time-lapse settings here and make sure that it's recording at 4K at lossless quality. So when you're drawing, Procreate will record a time-lapse video of your drawing process. So now that you have your own canvas, you can just tap on it to create that canvas at that size and resolution. So I have my reference photo on the side here. If I'm drawing on location, my reference will be in front of me. So the first thing I want to do is to create a few layers. The first layer, I will use a light blue to create some drafting lines to help me create the composition so that I can fit all the subject that I want to fit onto the canvas. So this part here is going to be very quick. I just want to basically get the composition. It doesn't really matter if you can't draw the details at this stage because the details are not important. All you want to do is to fit everything onto the page to make sure that you have enough space to fit everything onto the page, and you can draw more accurately later on. So typically this process for me will just take like 5 minutes. If I'm drawing with my watercolor sketchbook, depending on how complex the scene is, I may actually use pencils to create drafting lines as well. But if the scene is not that complicated, then I may just go or draw with ink straight away. There is a van park here. I am not able to see the side of the van because my reference photo is cropped off, but if you're drawing on location, you get to see like everything. And if there is anything blocking your view, you can actually still stand up and move around to see what's in front of you. So this white car here, let me just place the wheels higher compared to the van. Let me zoom out slightly to have a look. All right, I think this is pretty much the completed draft. So when I'm drawing this building here, I want to make the line straight because I know in the real world the lines are straight. Okay, there are other tall buildings behind as well. There is an arch here, and this arch is actually cropped off. Okay, so this part of the sketch is almost done, so you can actually see the sketch coming to life already. So now I want to, oops, what happened? My iPad is breaking down, by the way. The power button is faulty, that's why it turns off by itself. Okay, so what I want to do is to make this more transparent so that when I draw with black lines over the drafting lines, I will not be distracted by the lines beneath. So let me just rename this layer draft, and this layer will be called lines, and I will be using black. The brush that I am using is a custom brush that I bought online. Anyway, to follow along with this tutorial, you can use any of the inking brushes included with Procreate. However, if you are interested to get this brush, you can check out the link that I have for you in the video description below. It's not an affiliate link. I do not get paid to promote this brush. Let's make sure we are drawing on the correct layer. So I'm going to have one layer for lines, another layer for colors, another layer for textures, another layer for shadows. I don't use a lot of layers when I'm drawing on location because it's very difficult to keep track of all these layers. So let's draw the big shapes first. I'm going to draw like really fast. This line is a bit thick. Maybe I can make this line thinner. Yep, I think it's better to have the lines thinner. So I have the brush controls here on the left side. So what I want to do is to draw the big shapes first, and then later on draw the details within the shapes. There is a sign here. Let me zoom in for you to see. So with the drafting lines beneath, it's easy for me to draw those shapes accurately and quickly. So having drafting lines can help you draw faster and definitely more accurately. So you may notice my lines are a bit, how should I say, sketchy. They are not that straight. You don't have to draw a perfectly straight line to create the illusion of a straight line. There is a signboard here. The signboard is facing, the sign is actually facing the shop front or somewhere facing some direction. Anyway, with drawing, you can use your artistic license to have the sign point wherever you want it to point. So I want it to point like this. Now with Procreate, by default, you can use two fingers to tap on the display to undo. And Procreate has good palm rejection. So now I can actually draw on the display with my finger, but you can actually turn off that feature. Let me erase. There should be a shortcut for me to erase when I double tap the pencil. Maybe I did not turn that on. So let me go into the settings, the gestures control. Where is the erase? I'm going to press toggle this. So basically this will allow me to press this square here and then go into the erase mode. I find it easier to do this than to double tap on the Apple Pencil. And when I release my finger, it goes back to the brush. I realized that if I draw like slow, my lines will look like too rigid, so I will want to draw like faster to have the lines look more sketchy, more loose. And we have this van that is parked here. This van is basically a rectangular block. I cannot see the side mirror of the van, so I'm using my artistic license to add the side mirror. We have the wheels here, 1 and 2. If you draw on location, if you draw a lot, if you get a lot of practice, you will be able to remember how a vehicle should look like. And if you are drawing the vehicle for the first time, chances are you are going to draw the vehicle from your imagination, and that vehicle from your imagination is not going to look the same as the vehicle that you see in the real world. But if you have drawn like a lot of vehicles from observation, from the real world, you will be able to draw vehicles more accurately. So that's one nice advantage, nice thing about drawing on location. It helps with your memory. It will help you remember more basically. This is the line dividing the first and second floor. When drawing digitally, you have the advantage of being able to undo, but I would recommend you try not to use the undo unless necessary, because the more you undo, the more time you have to take to draw the scene. And we have another vehicle here. And also if you just keep undoing, it will tell your mind that it's alright to make mistakes. I mean, it is alright to make mistakes, but if you just keep undoing, it will actually make you more careless. For example, if you are drawing with ink, you won't be able to undo. So because you are not able to undo, you would be more careful when you are drawing with ink. But when you're drawing digitally, at least for me, I find that sometimes I am a bit more careless because I can just undo, and I can erase. Oops, see, notice that I drew the windows wrong. This wheel here, it shouldn't be in contact with this vehicle, so let me just erase here. So when you're drawing, it would be good to pay attention to where the lines intersect. So I'm going to put the wheel here, and this wheel is further away, like this, and higher. And we have this here. There is a pillar here. This pillar will go down from the top to the bottom floor, so you have to draw a continuous line to create that illusion that the pillar is continuous. So now I've used the pillar to divide this shop house from this shop house. I will continue to use the pillars to divide. And now that I have the pillars, Now that I have the shop house divided, I can draw the windows within the shapes. This is so much easier compared to earlier on when I drew the windows first before drawing the pillars. So here I'm going to be like really sketchy. And I think with drawing digitally versus drawing traditionally or on a sketchbook is, with digital software, with a tablet, you can zoom in to draw those details. And sometimes it's not a good thing because you don't want to draw too much details. Sometimes you want your sketch to be simple. You want to simplify your sketch. You don't want so many details. So if you're drawing with paper, if you're drawing on paper, you will run out of space to draw details, in which case you can just leave out the details. But here you may have the temptation to actually zoom in to draw those little details, which is good if you need to draw the details, but it's not good if you want to simplify and you cannot resist the urge to draw all those details. So this part here is very difficult for me because the reference photo actually doesn't show what's happening here. So I'm actually just drawing what I think is there. Okay, so let's see what we have here so far. Good. I think this is nice. The sketch is slowly coming to life. Let's draw the building, the tall building in the background. So for the tall building, it's the height is here. Yep. So I have that curve there. This curve is not the exact curve that you see in the reference photo, and it's all right. I may want to turn off this ability to draw with the finger. So let me go into the gestures control again. So under general, you can disable touch action. So let's turn that on. And now when you draw with your finger, nothing happens. But when you draw with the Apple Pencil, you can draw. So this is quite convenient. This is basically perfect palm rejection. I may have drawn this too wide because based on the reference photo, the gap between the gap here is actually much smaller. So let me see what I should do. Maybe I can draw this and erase this. Yep. Okay, I think it looks all right now. Yeah, I think it looks all right. Let me draw a sign here below. Another window here. So the main shape of the shop houses are already drawn. Now it's just now I just have to add details. Notice this part here. So this is an accidental straight stroke that I drew with my finger earlier. And if you don't disable touch, things like this can happen. And to rescue this, to correct this, you have to unfortunately redraw this area. So it might be a good thing for you to actually disable touch. Basically have it such a way that you can only draw with the Apple Pencil. You cannot draw with your finger. Okay, let's see if there are any more straight strokes. Another one here. The angle that I have here is wrong because if I look at the corner of this roof, this should be much higher at the window. I mean aligned to the window here, but I have the arch here, so Again, I mean, this is a sketch, so if you want to draw accurately, you may have to like erase all this part here and redraw again. But since this is a sketch, I can actually just use my artistic impression to sort of correct this scene. Now, if you draw long enough, if you have a lot of practice, you can correct your scenes very easily. However, if you get like the perspective, like if your perspective is really off, then correcting the scene is going to be like very challenging. So sometimes it's good to actually draw those drafting lines first. Another thing about the drawing on location is your eyes are very sensitive and will be able to see details in the darker areas easily. So for example, here it's really dark. It's very difficult for me to see the details here from the photograph. I'm actually just drawing some tables. Yeah, I'm just going to draw tables even though I cannot see the tables. This is a restaurant, so there should be tables. If you're drawing on location, you will be able to see what's happening in this darker shaded area in the photograph, but drawing with a reference photo has its limitations. You will want to add some people in the scene because it's going to make your scene look more lively. So to draw people, try to draw those people who are not moving first, because people who are moving are a bit more challenging to draw. And also zoom out to see how big that person is in relation to whatever you have just drawn. So I think the size for this person it's alright. So let me just draw another person here. So with people in your scene, it's going to make your scene look more lively, and also it will help the person who is looking at your sketch get a sense of just how big all those other elements are by comparison to those people in your scene. Yep. So this is a coffee shop that is selling some coffee and some food. I'm going to leave this area just black. Later on just empty. Later on I will just draw those details. Okay, at this stage, this sketch is almost complete. I can just look around the sketch to see if there are any more things I need to draw, like these buildings in the background that I have almost accidentally left out. I'm going to use really thin lines to draw these buildings in the background because for elements that are in front, that are close to you, you can draw them big with thicker lines. For elements that are further away, you can draw them small with thinner lines. And now for the coloring process. I forgot to mention earlier that when I am drawing, I try to close the lines. So for example, when I'm drawing this triangular shape, I don't want to have gaps like this, because when it comes to coloring, I'm going to use the fill bucket tool. The fill bucket needs to fill into an enclosed area, and when there is a gap, the color will leak out. Let me show you what I mean. So first thing I want to do is to tap here and make this a reference layer, so that when I add or use the fill bucket tool, they will use the reference layer to fill the colors. So I'm going to add like an orange. Should I have red for the roofs? Let's have red for the roofs. So make sure you are painting the colors into the correct layer. So this layer will be called colors. Make sure to choose the correct layer and drag and paint the color into the shape here. you can like control how much fill there is, how much area the fill will cover. So this is good. You can see some jagged edges here. The colors did not fill onto did not overlap the lines there. So what I want to do now is to move this color layer below the lines. Right, so now it looks better. You may still need to go in to color the edges. Now this is the part where I don't enjoy particularly, because it's a lot of work. If I'm painting with actual watercolor, the watercolor will just go over the lines, but here with this fill bucket, it's not perfect. All right, so let's do this again. Oops, notice the colors actually went out. So let me try it again. Yep, so you can control how sensitive the fill bucket is, or you can just do this. Yeah, just color it like this. Depends on whether or not you want to save time or whichever is easier for you. I've almost colored everything that is red in the scene, so here I just want to go in and fill the lines. You can see the lines here, they are black and white, so I may want to just add this red over just to make it look nicer. Now a digital sketch will not be able to replicate the traditional look 100%. Maybe it can replicate the traditional look 100%, but it's going to take a lot of time. So for me, I try not to, I would love to have the digital sketch look traditional, but I also know that it's going to take a lot of time. So I don't really, I'm not really too fussy about how digital or how traditional the sketch looks. Okay, so sometimes I may actually want to, like, you see this? I'm painting outside the line. If I'm painting with real watercolors, sometimes I will not be able to like paint within the lines because I paint too fast. So sometimes I may want to add this mistakes into the scene. Next thing I want to do is to add some textures to the awning, the sunshade. So what I want to do is to add texture only onto the red areas. So I'm going to use 2 fingers to swipe here, basically to mask out all the other areas. And I'm going to switch to a different color. I'm going to use this color wheel and switch it to something that is orange. And I'm going to switch to a different brush. Again, the brush that I'm using is actually a custom brush that I bought. This is Hartz, Hartz one. So this is a nice textured brush. So earlier on, when I mask out the non-pixels, this allows me to paint within the pixels here. So now when I paint over, you can actually see some texture, but this color doesn't look that great. So let me just make this, instead of changing the color, I want to change the value. Yeah, so now you can see the texture. I think this is nice. I can adjust the size of the brush just to see what kind of textures it can create. I can also make this even brighter, more highlights, basically give it more highlights like this. Yeah, this looks nice. I like this texture. So compared to this flat roof, you can see the texture gives it more life. But also I don't want to like paint over the whole thing. I just want to give it some texture. Okay, this is nice. Next up, let's paint all the other areas. Before you paint the other areas, you have to decide whether you should create another layer for the other elements. So in this case, I may want to create another layer for all the other elements. So here for the roofs, I'm going to rename this again. I'm going to rename this as, let's rename this as roofs. Yeah. So I've just switched back to the other brush, and now I'm going to basically color everything else. Let's try and use this again. There are some plants here. Now for this particular part, I may want to paint this dark area here first. So I did not draw the lines for the plants, and I also did not draw the lines for the blinds, the sunshade. Sometimes it's good to leave certain things not drawn. Don't use lines for everything. So here I can draw the plants like this. Oops. Yep, my iPad Pro is dying. Later I have to, right after this tutorial, I would have to send this iPad for servicing. So let's use this shape here, this color here, to paint the blinds. And here, and here. This is getting very irritating. And I can use a darker shade to draw the lines on the blinds, maybe something darker so that I can see the details. Yep, this is nice. And I can use this green again, but this time make it darker to add some details. I can also throw in some red as if there are some flowers here. And you see this black lines here. Let's delete the black lines. Let's go to the lines layer and delete the black lines. All right, let's press this eraser and move the lines up. So now it looks like the plants are in front of the pillars, and the plants, they don't have outlines, so it makes the plants look softer compared to the hard edge pillars. By the way, this color palette that I have here is also a custom color palette that I bought online. I cannot remember the name of the person who actually sold that palette though, but it's a really nice palette. You can buy a lot of these color palettes online, but don't get like too carried away with buying too much of this. Now for the ground, I also want to add texture. So remember earlier I used a double finger to swipe right to create the mask. So now this allows me to paint texture onto the ground, onto the pixels, and I want to make this darker. Okay, so let's use the other brush again. Okay, see the texture, very nice. Yeah, so let me just add some texture. And now let's color the buildings in the background. So I'm going to color this building with a light blue. Nothing is happening because we need to unmask this first. Oops. Oops, looks like the fill bucket is not working correctly, so I would have to actually go in and color this myself. And I want to draw the windows here. For the windows, let's have it a dark. Let's have dark blue windows. Okay, let's have the logo here. This car has dark windows here and here, and the bottom of the vehicle is like black because of the cast shadow. But we want to leave some light here because we can see the front of the vehicle. The cast shadow will go to the side of this curb here, and we have to have the cast shadows for this as well, the van. And we need to draw this part here, make it darker. There are some reflections, but I'm not going to draw those reflections. So remember this shop. So when I paint this black area, I want to create an outline for the people standing in front so that we can see them more clearly. If you like paint over the person, you're going to lose the shape. Let's draw some details within this black shape. So I'm going to make maybe a square here. Maybe there's a signboard with menus. So let's have some white here. Maybe there's a light bulb here, horizontal light bulb, and some details here, areas of highlights. And maybe I can have this side white, but I will blend this side here like this, but I try not to lose the shape of the head. And this area here, because of the photo that I'm using, I cannot see the details here, so maybe I can just paint all these areas black. And I will draw some details later on for the chairs, the tables and the chairs. So earlier on, I shouldn't have drawn those tables and chairs with the black lines because it's easier to paint the black shape and then draw those details with lighter color over the black color. Now when you are painting colors, make sure you paint onto the correct layer. So earlier on, I painted the orange onto the roof layer. See, if I turn off the roof, I also turn off the chairs and also the colors for all the people here. Yeah, so be careful not to paint onto the wrong layer. So next thing I want to do is to add shadows, and I'm going to create a new layer for the shadows. I'm going to have the blending mode as multiply so that the shadows can like blend over the colors. And let's paint the shadows. So I'm going to use a dark color. I'm going to use maybe this warm gray. I'm going to try warm gray first. If it doesn't work, then we can try cool gray. Okay, I think a cool gray works better. So let's paint the cast shadows. If the shadow is too light, you can make it darker later on. I'll show you how. But first, let's paint all the cast shadows. I've just added the shadows. So if you find the shadows too light, you can actually make them darker. So in this case here, I may want to duplicate this shadow layer first as a backup just in case things go wrong after the adjustments. So select shadows, select adjustments here, select hue, saturation, brightness, and select layer. So now you can actually make the shadows darker. I'm going to make this slightly, just slightly darker. So it looks like the sky is too bright, it's too white, it's too boring. So I've just created another layer for the sky right at the bottom. So now I'm going to use this color, this blue, and just fill the whole sky with this color. And it looks alright. It looks alright, except this sky, it's a very flat color. So I want to swipe again to lock to create a masking layer. And I'm going to use this lighter color to paint the clouds. So let's see what happens. Oops. So a lot of trial and error is going to, you will need to have a lot of trial and error to find the right brush to paint clouds, and I think this brush works fine for me. It's a very nice brush, and let's have the clouds be more white. So some of the clouds will be very white. Undo here, let's make it more white here. Last layer will be textures. Just basically just adding some dots here and there to create some textures. Let's have it as a normal. Where is my texture? Oops, I used the wrong brush. So let's use this brush again. Too big. Okay, just some textures here and there will do. And also I want to draw the root markings. So for the root markings, let's find the color layer and use white for that. We have some root markings here and some yellow markings here. We can add more details here and here. Some textures at the top. So now that the sketch is complete, the last thing you may want to do is to create another layer right at the top. It's an empty layer, so that next time when you open up the file, if for some reason you accidentally add any stray strokes onto the art, you can actually just delete that productive layer. So let's take a look at the time-lapse video that was recorded. So this is the time-lapse video, and if you want to, you can share this time-lapse video on your Facebook or Instagram page. If you want to share this on Instagram, you will have to export this video out first and then crop it to a square and then upload to Instagram. So that's nice. The time-lapse video will take up a lot of storage space, so let's take a look and see how much storage space the time-lapse video is taking up. Let's look at the statistics. So that 4K UHD file is taking up 310 megabytes. The time-lapse video is taking up 137 megabytes. So if you want to save some storage after you export and share your time-lapse video, you may want to just delete away the time-lapse video, but I'm just going to keep it here. So notice the file size is 300 megabytes. So if you want to sketch like this, 1 gig will allow you to store maybe just 3 or 4 files. 10 gigs will allow you to store 30 or 40 files. Hopefully your iPad has enough storage to store all the files.